a friend, Christy's dear friend Dana passed away. I also want to say a little prayer for Miss Mary Alice, Sister Lieu's mother, if you guys can join me. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord.
And let the perpetual light shine upon them.
Let their soul and the soul of all the faithful departed, by the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen. Thank you, Sister Lieux, for driving from the audience to just give us this wonderful gift. We're very, very grateful. Thank you all to all of you who came this morning for the rosary. Sister Lieux.
Actually, today came from New Roads. And I said to myself, as I drove along Falls River with a moon, a crescent moon, and the sun just rising, this is what it was like every Monday morning as I drove here with my sister. And I was just commenting. I don't know if you all know Beth Malone, right? Anyway, she was B.B. James, which was my roommate here, and we were just commenting. This coming May 28th is the 50th anniversary of our graduation. So I'm honored that she's here today. But I don't think this is one of my better ones, but we'll see. Anyway, I wanted to do something kind of focused on journeying with Jesus through Lent. And I think, sometimes it's good to go back to what I consider old practices. When I was a child, during Lent, I know I went to the Way of the Cross at least once a week with my father. And I was doing something for our community prayer that some of my Jesuit friends have done that's about the Way of the Cross through the eyes of migrants and the people on the border and the things that they're having to endure. And I thought, that's great, but we all have our own ways of the cross. And so I want to lead us through a reflection that has something to do with that. And so I'm going to start with a meditative song, and then we're going to take a look at some things, okay?
Now we follow Jesus. Now we follow Jesus. Praise to you for leading us in grateful sacrifice. Now we follow Jesus. Now we follow Jesus.
I don't know if you noticed that halfway through that song, it went from they followed Jesus to we followed Jesus. So that's kind of where we are today, and I don't want to stand in the way of you all seeing. Uh, so um, I want to talk about walking with Jesus to Calvary. I know one person at least has been to Jerusalem. Anybody else been to Jerusalem? The most disappointing thing for me is making that walk to where they think the cross is, because it's nothing like you have imagined all your life about walking up a little mountainside. And, you know, as we've seen in all the pictures of our lives, it's a cobblestone path that you take up to where they believe Jesus was crucified. So it's great that the rest of you in some ways haven't seen it, because then your imagination can be where you want it to be. So anyway, I want to kind of walk us through some of the stations. So, and I also want to say, traditionally there were not 14. Some of the ones at the end were added. So just keep that in mind, kind of thing. But we know that the first one is that Jesus is condemned to death. And if you think about this one, the question I ask myself is, how often do I encounter either being wrongly accused of something or knowing someone who's been wrongly accused? Sister Karen, who I live with, the younger one, Karen, said to me just this week, she was talking about the governor of Alabama commuted a sentence of a man who was to be executed the next day because he had been wrongly accused of a crime. So we know those things happen, just as we know that Jesus was condemned to death for something that was not really a crime. So we get to the second station, and Jesus has to accept his cross. Well, that's life in some ways. We all have burdens and crosses that we have to accept. And I don't know about you all, but I don't often reflect about the fact that when I'm complaining because I got something that's happening to me, that it's same as accepting my cross. And most of the time begging God to take it away from me. I'm not saying, okay, I willingly will accept this pain because it's going to lead to some glory, kind of thing. But I know in my life, if I ever really think about it, all of the things that have been moments of great suffering have led to moments of great joy, have led to something that unexpected that I didn't expect to happen in my life. So I think that that's important for us to remember. We get to the third station, and Jesus falls for the first time. We're going to get to two more where Jesus falls. So there are three that Jesus falls. And I think there's something in this for us to remember, in the sense of how many times do we fall, do we fail? And we get up and we think we're not going to have this problem again. And then guess what? We fall again. We have the same problem again. Human condition, in a way. And this is Jesus' sign of he's accepting the human condition, that he's not Superman who can carry that cross all the way up to Calvary. But he's going to fall, he's going to fail, and we're going to fall, and we're going to fail. And there's some, I've said this to you all before. I'm not a theologian, I'm a physicist. So, I hang around with a lot of theologians or people who have studied theology, and I don't hang around with a lot of people who study physics, that's for sure. But and when I'm talking about the religions of the Sacred Heart, but the thing is, I think it's also a parallel to the fact that we're going to see as we read the Passion that Peter is going to deny Christ 3 times. Jesus has fallen 3 times. And then we're going to get to that beautiful passage after Easter in John 23rd, where Jesus says to Peter, Simon, son of John, Jesus loved me 3 times. It's all a parallel to the fact that this is how cycle of life kind of thing. Yes, I love you, but guess what? I'm going to say I deny you again. You can bet your life on it at some point. We hope that Peter didn't, but maybe he did. And maybe he had to pick himself up again. So the thing here for us to remember is that we fall, but we must pick ourselves up again. And that happens in a variety of ways, and sometimes it takes time to pick ourselves up. And sometimes it takes just grace. The healing presence of God will bring us back to the place where we can have this thing heal us in a way, So then the next station is Jesus meets his mother. Now we can all imagine and that if Joseph were still alive, he probably would have been there too. Because what parent wouldn't have wanted to share in the suffering of their child? That's the natural inclination of a parent. And we have to think that God was walking with Jesus as he walked with Calvary, as he walks with us in our journey of life. But so he meets his mother, who it must have cost him. I mean, I sometimes think, we think about the Sacred Heart of Jesus, this is probably the moment where his heart is really that heart that's feeling the compassion for his mother, and she's feeling the compassion for her son. Because all along, according to what we've been taught and according to what's been written in Scripture and the interpretation of it, both Jesus and Mary knew that the end was not going to be pleasant. And so she knows that this is going to happen. So you can just imagine what her pain was in this moment. And so I think about that with parents, because I think sometimes parents suffer a great deal watching their children. I've yet to meet a parent, and I've spent a lot of time with young people. I've yet to meet a parent who hasn't had to struggle with the child, at least one of them. But and as I said to my father, my dad lost his business in the oil bust in the 1980s, and he was devastated, just devastated. And I was talking, I don't know which one of them, my sister, or I think it must have been my sister. I said, my dad was a truly holy man, truly, truly holy man. And I said to them, there comes a time on the path to holiness that the only path is the cross. Suffering is inevitable. And I've had that in my own life, and I've said to myself when it happened to me, I saw how my dad eventually dealt with this. And so I'm going to pick up my cross, and I am going to move forward with my journey, kind of thing. This is one of my favorites. Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus to carry the cross. And I got to tell you, the reason this one has become one of my favorites is because a friend of mine sent me a card of Simon of Cyrene carrying the cross. Back in 1999, a dear friend of mine, and I was thinking about this when we were in the chapel, probably there are a lot of significant religious in the Sacred Heart in my life, but this was one of the most significant. And I met her on this campus, and I hadn't thought about this. And the only reason I know is because tomorrow is her birthday. 50 years ago, tomorrow. And she was my college professor, and she influenced a lot about what ended up happening with what I studied and everything else. But she had a bicycle accident in 1999. She had severe head injury when she was the vice president of the university. Never, ever the same person. And when it first happened, Sister Shirley Miller sent me a card, Simon, carrying the cross, helping to carry the cross. Because what I was up to in St. Louis was trying to help Sister Lieux come back in some ways. And she did in some ways, come back. And but it was a lot of work. And for anyone who's an educator and you'd spend time with kids who struggle about learning, think about what it must be like at 60 to learn all your numbers again, all your letters again. And eventually stuff came back, but that's what that journey was for me. It was like Simon helping Jesus to carry the cross. So think about who in your life are you helping to carry a cross at this moment? Mary mentioned my mother, who passed away about 7 weeks ago. But this has been a journey for the last 10 years for me. My father died, and I did not realize how much help my mother needed. And so every free moment that I have had the past 10 years, I've been in New Roads with my mother. So that became how Simon was operating in many, many ways. And what happens to you is that things change, and there'll be something else that'll be part of the journey. I could talk about, as my brother says, I know you spend a lot of time with elderly people. He just told me that last week. It's because I'm responsible for health, wellness, and elder care in the United States and Canada for the religious of the Sacred Heart. And he's right. He's absolutely right. So that could be a cross, I guess, but it's also a grace. It's actually a real grace to walk with people who are on the last part of their journey, because they're waiting for the kingdom of God. They are waiting, and it's always interesting. So here we have another moment of compassion where Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. We don't really know who Veronica is. It's the first time she's mentioned, right, Ron? This is one of my former religion teachers, so I am asking them. So, we don't know who this woman is, but she's someone who appears. They give her a name, and she must have been significant in the early Christian community. She must have been a follower of Jesus, but she dares, amidst all of this craziness, she dares to approach Jesus and to wipe his face, to offer one sign of compassion, one sign of gentleness, and allow the humanity to be part of this journey kind of thing. So the question is, are we Veronica? Or who is Veronica in our lives? Who's wiping our faces? Who's journeying with us and helping us to get past this moment in our lives that we have to get through? And as I said, we were going to get to the second time. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because when I talked about the first fall, we knew that there would be a second fall. I really wished when I was doing this, I wanted some beautiful depictions of the stations, and I asked late, but he said he was going to get them to me. But anyway, I didn't get them. The stations that are at the Rosary are the stations that were at the novitiate at Albany in Kenwood. And so I wanted those to put in this PowerPoint, and then I had to find some online. And these, what you get to choose from, some of them are soupy, and some of them are meaningful. And one day I'll get the ones from the Rosary, and I'll put them in, and I'll send them to Mary so she can send this out to everybody with the beautiful ones. Then we get to Jesus meets the women. Now, the thing I find so interesting in the stations, but also in something else, is that we got Jesus' mother, we got Veronica, and now we got the women. The only guy we see in this whole picture is Simon, who just is pulled by the Romans into this picture. This is kind of interesting that the female aspect is is coming in, kind of thing. The women are coming there. I was saying in our community prayer this week, I once had a calendar that had a block print, and it was at the cross, and it says the women stayed. And we know that Peter and all of the others, somewhere they went, who knows? But we had 3 women at the cross. So it's an interesting thing to think about. And if I were at the Rosary, and the sodality is all women at this point, I think they're going to probably begin to think about men. So I thought, well, do I say that? But I think it's true. It's more about that aspect of we all have the male and the female in our lives, and the gentleness, the compassion, but the courage is the other thing. These women had the courage to move forward, to get out of the crowd, and to actually greet Jesus, to offer some, I hate to keep using the same word, compassion, some love, some support. But they had to have courage to do that, and they had to have heart. And courage comes from the word that related en français. So I think about that. We're back at Jesus falls the 3rd time. Then we have Jesus is stripped of his clothes. This is humiliating. This is a moment of where I'm at my bare heart. I have to be exactly who I am before God. That's where we are. We're at the point where Jesus is now this is who he is before his Father. There are plenty of times, I think, in life where we're humiliated, where something happens and we say to ourselves, how can I bring myself to be there again? How can I face so-and-so? How can I admit the truth to someone and be humiliated because I admitted the truth? Or not, it's not humiliated when I admit the truth. It's that I become humble. There's a difference in some ways between being humble and being humiliated. Humility is a lessening of myself, whereas to be humiliated is I've been lessened by someone else or a situation. In my opinion, that's no definition, but I think it's something to think about. And then Jesus is nailed to the cross. I sometimes think that this might have been the most painful part of his journey, to think about the nailing of a person to a cross. And if you ever look at some of the pictures, about the crucifixion, the other 2 people who were crucified weren't nailed; they were tied. So that the Romans were extremely brutal to Jesus, is what's being depicted. Now, of course, we don't know for sure, but that's what tradition tells us. And then Jesus dies on the cross. They say that one of the most painful deaths that a person can have is suffocation. And you can suffocate because you had a bag over your head. That's what you usually do. But the same thing happens when you drown. You suffocate. But the same thing really happens when you're on the cross. When a person, that's why the crucifying people in ancient times was a painful, painful execution. Because by hanging there, your lungs were trying to get the breath. And so while Jesus is, we don't know for sure, but while a person is hanging on the cross, they're trying to lift themselves up at the same time in order to breathe. And every time they do that, those nails are even more painful, kind of thing. So it's a really brutal kind of execution, and it's not instantaneous. It's not like the electric chair or a lethal injection. It takes time, and so I think in our own lives, it's a reflection. It's not about sometimes what we're dying to is not instantaneous. It's a painful time over a period of time, and we have to walk with it and try to survive, and pray for the graces to be able to do it. So Jesus is taken down from the cross and prepared for burial, and then he's placed in the tomb. And these are the last two that sometimes people say were added. That being taken down from the cross and being placed in the tomb are exactly part of the way of the cross. But it's our tradition that there are 14 of them. And as we know, he's placed in the tomb and he's not actually yet prepared for the kind of burial that people of that time would have done because it was the Sabbath. And so he's just placed there. So I don't know if that's been helpful, but I really, that's where I've been this Lent. It's kind of thinking about how am I walking to Calvary, and what more do I need to do? Holy Week is going to be upon us in 2 weeks, I think. And the question is, what will I do during Holy Week so that I'm there when I get to Easter, I'm ready. I was thinking about how much nicer April, when we get past the resurrection, is one of my favorite times in Scripture, because we then get to reflect upon the apparitions of Jesus, all the places where Jesus appears after his resurrection, and to reflect upon the joyful part of Christianity. This time of Lent is for us to reflect upon the painful part of Christianity. And we do it year after year, and each year we kind of grow in our understanding of what it really means to walk with Jesus. Amen. Amen. I just told Nicole, don't look at this desktop. What I said to Nicole, I said, I don't know how it is that being on the provincial team is more busy than being the headmistress of a school. But anyway, any thoughts, questions, whatever?
Would you tell, I remember what you're talking about when Kenwood sent out the notice to all the schools, do you want any, religious memorabilia from it? Can you just talk a little bit about that? I know that the Rosary was one of the first ones to reach out to.
So we had this gigantic, unbelievable. If you look up Kenwood or Convent of the Sacred Heart. You online, you probably find some pictures. It was a massive building because at times we had over 100 novices there, with a beautiful chapel, beautiful all wooden, a lot like ours. But as someone said, the one thing you can say about the religions of the Sacred Heart is that most of they had a great eye for property and for building nice places. But we have a few places that I would say are more traditional schools. But anyway, the early ones are this way. So Kenwood is an old school, and it actually has ties to here because Aloysia Hardy is buried there. And in a very prominent place. And I actually, with Sister McCanty, sent these things out to all the schools about what would you like. We got I don't know if it's still in the front hall. There was a mater in the front hall, right by the head office. It's still there. That came from Kenwood. No, we had that before. They have one. They had one there. Yep. Well, we had them all over the place. That's typical. We buy one. We buy 30 of them. Then we have those wooden statues in many places. But anyway, Kenwood was a special place. And so anyway, I told Sister McCanty when she asked what we wanted. You could send Aloysia Hardy back to her home. And she said, no. We still have the cemetery at Kenwood. But 2 years ago, I guess, it burned to the ground. We sold it. We moved our sisters. We had to move our elderly sisters were there, and we had to move them because we couldn't get the licensing we needed, and they needed more care than we could offer there. So we moved to a place run by the Carmelite Sisters for the Elderly and Infirm. And when we moved out of Kenwood, we had also had a school there, and called Doan Stewart. It's not a great history, but I'll give it to you just the same. Parts of it are interesting. But at one point, the Episcopalian school in Albany St. Agnes asked to merge with Kenwood. And when they merged, they became an ecumenical school, and they took the name Doan Stewart. Doan for the bishop, a famous Anglican bishop, and Stewart for Janet Erskine Stewart, who had been Anglican and converted to Catholicism before she became a religious of the Sacred Heart. So anyway, that school went on for a while, and then there were some financial issues, but there were also some issues about when the goals and criteria, when the foundational principles that I know some of you won't know about all of this, but there were, at some point we had to institute into the goals and criteria 5 foundational principles. And one of them is that the school's identity is Catholic within the Roman Catholic Church. And the school took real exception with that, with the provincial. And the provincial said, choose what you want to do. Do you want to stay in the network considered the school? Or do you want to be what you are? And they chose to leave the network. And so it was a painful moment. And when they chose to leave, they also chose to leave the building, which left us with this big, enormous, empty building. So we sold it to someone who was going to develop it. And then nothing happened. I think the person couldn't get the money. And the word on the street is that the fire was arson. And that's where it is. And I haven't been there since I saw the pictures of when the fire was raging, because they sent them and we could watch live. But I haven't been there since then. I have to go next trip to Albany. I'm supposed to be going to take a picture of Aloysia Hardy's grave and Mother Thomasini, who Caroline Richard, she's not here today. Caroline Richard has been working on a book on Mother Thomasini, who was a great friend of Aloysia Hardy, who's buried right next to her. And I'm supposed to get for the book nice photographs of my mandate from Sister Lieux. I think I'm going to Albany at the end of April. But anyway, so that's a long story that Dr. Adler wanted me to tell you. But I think that's what you wanted me to tell
I
him.
did. And I remember going there for one of the network meetings, and I forget what religion it was. Remember that room? It was red, and I remember you had to go through this curtain kind of thing